Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the cold, echoing silence of a medieval monastery, a world so far from your soft sheets and phone chargers that it might as well be another planet. Imagine this: you wake before the sun, wrapped in fog, trudging along a dirt path lined with crooked trees. Your shoes, if you even have them, are soaked through from the morning dew. Ahead looms a towering stone abbey, its windows narrow and dark like unblinking eyes. The great wooden gates creak open, and a monk in a brown habit nods silently. No smile, no welcome, just a gesture that says, you're not going back. Your modern life, left outside. No Spotify, no snacks, no screen time. You're entering a world built on rules, silence, and a baffling amount of candle wax. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your current time and where you're listening from, my love. Seeing how far we all travel together, even in our dreams. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you, besides the smell of damp stoners, the quiet, not peaceful quiet, eerie, thick, unnerving quiet. No idle chit-chat. No nervous jokes. Just the scuff of your own feet and the far-off toll of a bell that sounds like it hasn't been tuned since Charlemagne sneezed. The monk guiding you says nothing. He gestures for you to follow, and you step into a narrow corridor that smells faintly of cabbage and beeswax. The walls are bare except for a few iron sconces and one faded painting of a very judgmental saint. You're led to a small wooden bench where you're told again, silently, to sit. This is your postulant entry. You're not a monk yet. You're a tryout, basically a holy intern without benefits. You'll spend the next several months proving that you're not only devoted, but durable, and quiet, and weirdly okay with never blinking again. Apparently, a younger monk arrives carrying what looks like a bundle of brown cloth and rope. It's your habit, the monk uniform, but you're not allowed to put it on yet. First, they take your clothes, all of them, yes, even that favorite hoodie. You're left standing in your underthings while your modern identity, shoes, belt, shirt, even your name is removed. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some monasteries literally burned the new arrivals' clothes as a symbol of cutting ties with the world. One less tunic, one more eternal soul. Then comes the cold water. Not a bath, exactly more like a symbolic rinse in a basin the size of a salad bowl. After that, a quick prayer in Latin which you don't understand, and the gift of silence begins. From this moment on, you are not to speak unless spoken to. You may nod, you may bow, you may contemplate the mold pattern on your new wall. But unless you're given permission, your vocal cords are on vacation. You're led through the cloister walker, covered stone path open to the courtyard. Other monks pass you eyes, low expressions unreadable. You wonder what they think of you. Do they see hope, a future brother, or just another soon-to-quit city boy with soft hands and an espresso addiction? Historians still argue whether the postulancy period was meant more to break the spirit or build it. Evidence suggests both. Finally, you're shown your cell. Not cell like prison. Okay, no, exactly like prison. A stone cube with a wooden bench bed, a straw-stuffed sack mattress, and a tiny window the size of your phone screen. There's a crucifix, a bowl, a pitcher of water, and a small wooden chest that rattles ominously when moved. You sit on the bench. The straw creaks. The cold sinks through the stone and into your bones. This is where you'll sleep, eat, pray, reflect, possibly cry a little. All in silence, all under the watchful eye of a god who, you're told, notices if you scratch your nose too long. Just before the door closes, the monk leaves you with your new name, a saint's name. No more Jason or Emma. Your brother Dominic now, or sister Scholastica, if this is the female route. Spoiler, it's not easier. One more thing, a bell rings somewhere above you. Low, long. Final. Your first day has officially begun, and you're not ready. You sit there for a long while, Brother Dominic, blinking into the dimness of your new world. The door hasn't locked, but you feel locked in. The robe itches already, the straw mattress smells faintly of old hay and someone else's despair. And then, you remember, you don't even get to keep your name gone, wiped clean, like chalk from a slate in medieval monastic life. The shedding of your birth name wasn't a cute ritual, it was a death of self. You had to become anonymous, humble, holy, to live only for God, not for ego or identity. Most monastic orders insisted you abandon the name your parents gave you and take up one of a saint, preferably a dead one. That's the whole point. Really, you're supposed to start practicing death while you're still alive. And this isn't just a symbolic thing. In the monastery's record books, your original name gets struck through. They literally cross it out. Some monasteries didn't even let family members use it anymore. Letters home, forbidden. If your mother called you William in a letter, it might never be delivered. The postman is prayer, and your inbox is eternal silence. A fringe detail. Here some monks, especially in the stricter Benedictine orders, were referred to only by their role, like the candlekeeper or the mill brother. Imagine if your job title replaced your entire identity. Brother floor scrubber does not inspire confidence. Now, the habit. It's the same for everyone. A coarse wool robe, a rope cincture, a hood you may or may not wear depending on your rank, and sandals if you're lucky. Some stricter sects preferred barefoot penitence even in winter. Your habit must be identical to your brother's, because uniformity kills vanity. You're not meant to look good. You're meant to vanish. You put the robe on, it smells faintly of damp wood and beeswax. The sleeves are too long. The hem drags a little. There's a rope for a belt. It digs into your waist, making you immediately miss elastic. But there's no mirror to check yourself. Monasteries didn't exactly invest in vanity sets. At this point, someone might deliver a wooden cross. No embellishments, just a plain crucifix, carved so roughly it still has bark on the back. Your jewelry now, and in case you were wondering, no, you don't get a mattress upgrade after a few months. You're not here to move up. Monastic life doesn't work like a company ladder. You either blend into the rhythm of prayer, work, and silence, or the monastery spits you out. Not violently, just wordlessly. People disappear the way candles flicker out. Historians still argue whether the early name-stripping rituals were more psychologically traumatic than physically difficult. Some argue that monastic anonymity offered freedom from ego and the tyranny of status. Others say it broke people irreparably. You don't have time to ponder that though. Another bell tolls. You still don't know what they all mean, but the monks do. Your neighbor, very tall, very thin man who may or may not have blinked in the last decade, nods to you and walks silently down the corridor. You follow. The hallway is lined with small windows that let in gray morning light. The kind of light that says, this is your life now. You walk past other cells, past one open door where a monk kneels by a bucket, scrubbing the floor with a small cloth, humming faintly under his breath until he notices you. Then dead silence again. Even humming can be frowned upon. You reach a side room, a stone chamber where your fellow postulants, about 6 of them, sit in a semicircle on stools. A senior monk begins to speak. He welcomes you not with warmth, but with gravity. He explains that today, your instruction begins. You will learn the rule of Saint Benedict, to be exact. Here's your historical nugget. The rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, became the standard for Western monastic life. It covered everything: how much you could eat, when to pray, how to sleep, and even how much wine to drink. Spoiler, not much. You're handed a small wooden tablet with your first Latin verse carved into it. You don't speak Latin. That doesn't matter. You're expected to memorize it by tonight. You're told to sit quietly and copy it onto a slate board with a stylus that keeps breaking, and your hands are already cold. As the lesson continues, your mind drifts. You remember your phone, how it fit perfectly in your hand, the way it lit up, the way it made you feel connected. You'd trade 3 rosaries and your last toenail for a scroll through cat memes right now. But here, there's only the scratch of wood on slate, the soft breathing of the others, and the rising realization that you've voluntarily entered a place where yourself has been left outside like muddy boots. You glance at your new brothers. No one meets your gaze. One of them is whispering his Latin so quietly, it's more breath than word. Another keeps closing his eyes, as if trying to erase himself. You're not sure if you're ready for this, but you're already inside, and the door closed hours ago. You've now been up for who knows how long. Time here doesn't work like it does out there. The monastery isn't built on hours, it's built on bells. And the bells don't care if you've just sat down, if you're halfway through chewing, or if you're finally mercifully asleep. You're beginning to realize something. There is no such thing as your schedule anymore. The bell rules everything. It tolls to wake you, it tolls to pray, it tolls to eat, to stop eating, to walk, to work, to reflect, to kneel, to go back to your cell and question all your life decisions. It even tolls to signal when it's time to go to the bathroom, though that bell sounds suspiciously like the regular work bell, and no one seems to agree on which is which. This whole structure is based on the liturgy of the hours, a divine calendar of prayer that slices your day into segments like a very sanctified pie. There are 7 to 8 prayer services every single day, starting well before sunrise and ending just before you fall over from exhaustion. Here's the breakdown. Matins, the one that starts in the middle of the night, yay, lords around dawn. If you're still awake from matins, congratulations. Prime, terce, sext, none. These are scattered throughout the working day. Think of them as God's coffee breaks. Vespers, early evening candlelight vibes. Compline, the night prayer. Right before bed, if you ever make it there without falling asleep in your soup, you get a gold star in your imagination. Of course, stars are worldly. Mainstream historical fact. This system wasn't just spiritual, it was logistical. Dividing the day like this ensured that monks didn't slack off, didn't oversleep, and didn't accidentally have a thought that wasn't pre-approved by the Holy Spirit. But here's a fringe tidbit. In some monasteries, especially during particularly zealous periods, the bells were rung manually by a monk called the campanarius, who had to stay awake through the night just to yank ropes at terrifying intervals. Imagine being that guy. No thanks, Tao. It's still early. Lauds is done. Prime is over. You've scratched out some Latin in the scriptorium, endured your first monastic breakfast, and you're now walking toward the garden for assigned work. Another bell just rang, so off you go. The garden isn't the serene, dewy paradise you might be picturing. It's more like a mud pit with aspirations. You're handed a hoe and instructed to start loosening the soil. Your arms are sore within 5 minutes. No one speaks. You notice the older monk beside you has impressively calloused hands, and a face that looks carved from old bread. He works like the dirt owes him money. You, meanwhile, are fighting off a sneeze because you inhaled a clump of medieval pollen. It's cold, then it's hot. Then it rains for 5 minutes. You're not allowed to leave until the bell tells you it's time. Again, historians still debate whether the bell system was genuinely uplifting or a form of spiritual micromanagement. Some monks wrote poetry about the bells as divine voices, others probably dreamed of melting them into spoons. Eventually, the bell rings again. Time for terce. You walk back inside, with sore legs and mud on your sandals, trying not to track it across the cloister. A novice gives you the side eye. When you do dot in the chapel, you kneel for the 3rd or 4th time today. The cold stone bites into your knees, and you're starting to think your body was not designed for this. Much religion. The prayers are in Latin. You still don't understand them. You mouth along awkwardly, 1 syllable behind, then 2. You're sure someone notices, but no one corrects you. That would require talking. There's a rhythm here, yes, but it's not your rhythm. It's the rhythm of bells, of chants, of eternal repetition. You've been stripped of your choices. Even your free will is now expected to report to the Abbey schedule. And you know what? It's weirdly comforting that, like giving up the remote control of your life, Everything is planned. No decisions to make. No calendar app to check. Just bells. Of course, that comfort wears thin when the next bell rings while you're trying to wipe your nose or sneak a moment to sit. Because again it doesn't care. You're herded, like a slightly more literate sheep, back into the work areas. This time, it's laundry. There's a big stone basin, some freezing water, and a bucket of what may or may not be lye. You dunk, scrub, wring. You lose feeling in your fingers again. You begin fantasizing about gloves, which somehow feels sinful. The day unfolds like this: bells and tasks and more bells. You never quite sit down for long enough. You never fully warm up. You never stop counting how many tolls come next. The word obedience echoes faintly in your mind. You're living in a schedule not made by humans, but handed down by God, or at least interpreted by a guy named Benedict with a really good sense of control. The final bell of the working day rings. You allow yourself one moment of rest, one soft breath of relief, only for another bell to chime immediately afterward. Compline is coming, and your knees aren't ready. You shuffle into the chapel again, feet numb, robe damp at the hem, brains somewhere between confusion and delirium. The sun has vanished beyond the stone windows, leaving only candlelight flickering across the floor and the quiet rustle of robes. The other monks kneel with practiced fluidity, like they were born kneeling. You, meanwhile, wobble down like a sack of potatoes auditioning for sainthood. This is Compline, the last prayer of the day. It's supposed to bring peace, closure, a moment of calm before bed. But your legs are cramping, your spine feels permanently curved, and you still have no idea what the Latin words mean. You whisper along anyway. It's not about understanding. It's about surrender. A hymn rises slow, mournful, beautiful. The voices blend into a single droning harmony that makes the stone walls hum. For a second, you forget where you are. The melody seeps into your bones, and just as you're almost lulled into tranquility, your stomach growls like a dying beast. Loudly, one of the monks glances at you, or maybe at the floor near you. It's hard to tell in this light. The prayer ends. A final blessing is mumbled by the abbot, who looks like he hasn't blinked since the Third Crusade. Then you rise, file out, and return to your cell in silence. The air is cold again. Your cell greets you with that same damp, medieval mustiness. Your bedding is unchanged: straw, sackcloth, and a wooden plank that somehow manages to be both too hard and too loud when you move. You lie down, hoping for sleep, but just as you close your eyes, dong, 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 dot. Another bell. Midnight matins. You're up again. Yes, that's right. You get woken up in the middle of the night to go pray. This isn't a glitch in the system. This is the system. Matins is considered one of the holiest prayers because it interrupts what your body loves most: sleep. The whole idea is that you're sacrificing rest for worship. Because what better way to prove devotion than stumbling barefoot through a dark stone corridor, half conscious, to chant psalms in freezing silence? You pull yourself from your straw bed. It creaks. Your knees pop. You briefly consider faking death, but you're not sure it would get you out of this. You follow the procession of monks by candlelight, their silhouettes tall and shadowy against the flickering hallway walls. The chapel at midnight feels different, like it's holding its breath. The candles are fewer, the chants softer. It's eerie and sacred and exhausting all at once. You kneel again. You chant again. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Some monastic orders had matins at 2 a.m., lasting for up to 2 hours. The idea was to break the night in half, two chunks of sleep, separated by sacred wakefulness. Scientists today call this Bophosic sleep. Medieval monks just called it obedience, fringe, tidbit. In some particularly strict monasteries, monks weren't even allowed to fully lie down at night. They slept sitting or reclining slightly, so they wouldn't get too comfortable and miss the bell. That's right, relaxation was literally suspicious. Tonight's matins involves Psalm 119. It's the longest psalm in the Bible, 176 verses. If you're wondering what that sounds like at 2 a.m. with no coffee and aching knees, Well, imagine a chant that never ends, in a language you barely understand. Surrounded by people who love that it never ends, your mind drifts. You think of home, of your old bed, of hot showers and central heating, and pillows with names like cloud foam or orthopedic bliss. You remember snack food, cheese, real cheese, not the crumbly monastery kind that smells like sadness, and hard decisions. You almost cry over a mental image of an orange plastic wrapper. Historians still argue whether these broken sleep prayer patterns contributed to spiritual clarity or just slowly dissolved monks' cognitive function. The record suggests both. After what feels like a century, Matins ends. There is no applause, no thanks for coming. Just a quiet dismissal and a slow return to your cells. This time, you do collapse into bed. No thoughts, no prayers, just darkness. You sleep hard, dreamless and deep. For maybe 3 hours, because then, dong.lods. The next day has already begun. The cycle spins again. You rise, you ache. You wrap yourself in wool and humility. There is no room for complaint. No, just 5 more minutes. No snooze button. You are not a person here. You are a prayer with legs. You are the schedule. And the schedule does not care. You drag your stiff limbs toward the chapel. Again, for Lord's. It's just before dawn. The sky still ink dark and silent. The air so cold, your breath ghosts out in pale wisps. You shuffle through the corridor like one of the undead, which, honestly, feels accurate at this point. The other monks move like ghosts, too silent, synchronized, strangely graceful in their exhaustion. Lords means praises. It's supposed to be the joyous greeting of the new day, the light finally returning after spiritual night. But right now, as you kneel yet again on the cold stone floor and try to force your dry lips into motion, it mostly feels like a really early, really religious group. The chant begins slow, deep, and low. Latin syllables roll over each other like waves, steady and ancient. You don't understand a word, but something about the rhythm holds you upright. You let the syllables pass through you like warm water, even if it's more of a mental illusion than a bodily truth. Mainstream historical fact. Monastic communities believed starting the day with Lords helped align one's soul with divine order. It was more than just a prayer, it was a resetting of the mind, like spiritual calibration before the daily grind. But here's a delightful fringe tidbit. Some abbeys kept a designated protas whose only job was to nudge sleepy monks back to attention during early prayers. Long stick, gentle poke, not the most glamorous role in the church, but someone had to do it. This morning, you dodged the prota's staff butt, just barely. Your head dips forward, chin bouncing once against your chest before jerking up again. You try to act like you are just deep in contemplation. No one buys it. But no one says anything either. Once Lord's ends, you're dismissed into the pre-dawn blur of the monastery grounds. Your task today, help with the morning meal. Help is generous. You're handed a wooden spoon that looks like it once stirred a medieval tar pit and sent to a stone hearth kitchen that would violate every modern fire code in existence. Your job, stir the pot. You peer into the cauldron. Inside, a grayish slop, bubbling in a way that does not inspire hunger. It's a blend of overcooked barley, root vegetables, and something that might have been lentils. Last week, a few unfortunate beetles float near the top. You stir gently and pretend you didn't see them. Breakfast is served in silence. Again, the same long wooden table, the same small crust of bread and single scoop of porridge in a chipped ceramic bowl. No butter, no sugar, no fruit, just steam. And penance. The abbot reads from scripture while everyone eats. His voice is monotone, dry, but you notice something calming in its regularity. It's like the world here runs on rhythm, not reason. A whisper of routine. Of control. Even if that control means eating bug barley sludge while staring at your own chipped bowl for the 6th time today. After breakfast, you're allowed a few minutes of what's loosely called meditation. This does not mean lying in the sun or quietly journaling with herbal tea. It means sitting on a cold bench outside the cloister wall, watching the sky turn from iron gray to something approaching blue. and pretending your feet don't feel like frozen turnips. You try to pray, you really do, but your mind keeps drifting warmth, to food, to comfort. You think about a hoodie you used to own, soft and warm, and stolen from your cousin. You'd give up your soul for that hoodie now, but wait, that's pride, or attachment, or covetousness, or one of the sins. Surely, you file the memory away and stare at a leaf on the ground instead. It's doing better than you are. Then comes chapter time. You're summoned to the chapter house, where the community gathers for correction and instruction. This is where monks confess their public failings, speaking out of turn, sleeping through matins, hoarding extra bread, or heaven forbid, laughing. Yes. Laughing. Today, a monk is brought forward and kneels. He's maybe in his 30s, face red, eyes fixed on the floor. The abbot says, "Brother Alred," broke silence in the scriptorium. The whole room exhales disappointment. Alred muttered something while copying a text, probably swearing under his breath after blotting ink on a page. For this, his penance is a day of silence and kneeling during mealtime. No food, just kneeling at the side while others eat. Not even allowed to make eye contact. You swallow hard. That could have been you. Probably will be you. It's only a matter of time. Historians still debate whether these punishments were more about spiritual purification or social control. Either way, it works. You immediately vow never to speak again, ever, in fact. You're not even sure if your voice still works. The rest of the day continues in its strict, tireless routine: bells, labor, more prayers, a small lunch, thin broth, and yesterday's barley, and your first solo scripture assignment. It's a passage from the book of Job. Of course it is. The story of a man who loses everything, suffers greatly, and remains faithful, on brand, by the time Vespers rolls around. Your body is sore, your spirit is frayed, and your scalp is still weirdly sensitive from the tonsure. The soft candlelight of the evening prayers offers a fragile sense of peace, but mostly because you know Compline is near. And after that, sleep. Real, uninterrupted, glorious sleep, until matins. Again. Today is a fasting day. You find out because your breakfast never arrives. No crust of bread, no bowl of grey porridge, not even the usual cup of murky water with something floating in it that you've decided is wholly protein. You wait, nothing comes. You look around, no one else seems surprised. One of the monks gives you a look that says, "Ah, the new one didn't check the calendar." And yes, there's a fasting calendar, an entire year divided between days you eat and days you mostly don't. And spoiler alert, there are a lot of days. You mostly damn single quotes today, for example, is one of those blessed penance-heavy Wednesdays where you are expected to reflect on the suffering of Christ by denying yourself the three things that would bring you joy: food, conversation, and food again. The silence continues. But now it's grumpier. Even the candles seem hungrier today, flickering with the faint energy of monks on low fuel. Mainstream historical fact. Fasting was an integral part of monastic life, especially in Benedictine and Cistercian orders. Entire seasons like Lent and Advent required reduced meals, and on many Wednesdays and Fridays, the faithful abstained from meat, dairy, and sometimes solid food entirely. This wasn't just about health or scarcity, it was about sacrifice, spiritual training, a divine detox, if you will. You're just hangry, and it doesn't help that your assigned labor for the day is in the kitchen gardens. That's right. No food for you, but plenty of food around you. You're handed a trowel and instructed to weed the herb patch. As you kneel in the damp soil, fingers freezing, your stomach gurgles like a medieval organ in a haunted church. You spot a plump carrot, half buried in the dirt, glowing like a treasure chest in an RPG. You consider it deeply. Would anyone notice if you took just one bite, a single nibble, a sacrilegious snack, fringe tidbit? Some monasteries, knowing full well that hunger leads to temptation, posted watchful monks called circators to patrol during fasting periods. Their job: catch anyone sneaking a fig, hoarding bread, or licking the mixing spoon. Basically, medieval lunchroom monitors with God on their side. You resist the carrot. Barely. The hours crawl. The bell rings for terse, then again for manual labor. You scrub wooden bowls from a meal you weren't allowed to eat, surrounded by the smell of cooked roots and bread. The scent wraps around you like an insult. It would be funny if it weren't so deeply painful. By midday, your head is light, your steps slower, and your Latin is suffering. You make 3 mistakes in your transcription: 1 misspelled word, 1 misplaced letter, and 1 ink blot that looks suspiciously like a dragon sneezing. You brace yourself for punishment. But the scriptorium master merely sighs and slides a fresh page toward you. Start over. At none the afternoon prayer, your thoughts blur in and out. The Latin chants stretch into dreamlike murmurs. You try to focus on the words, but your brain keeps returning to soup and warm butter, and the sound of a cheese wheel being sliced in a quiet kitchen somewhere that is not this cloister of controlled suffering. Historians still argue whether fasting brought about mystical clarity or just really vivid food hallucinations. Some monks claimed their most divine visions came while in prolonged fasting states. Others quietly passed out in garden sheds. The bell rings again. You rise. Evening brings vespers and with it, finally, a small, silent meal. You sit with the others in the refectory. The reader stands at the pulpit, reciting the lives of the saints. You try to listen, but your eyes are glued to the humble bowl in front of you. Inside, lukewarm vegetable broth and a slice of bread, so dry it could be used as chalk. You inhale it, you chew reverently. Slowly, monks are forbidden from eating greedily. You manage to find a middle ground between holy restraint and personal salvation. The bread turns to paste. The broth is barely seasoned, but to you, it tastes like divine nectar. You feel your soul returning, 1 sip at a time, after dinner. You're assigned to candle duty. You trim the wicks in the chapel, check the oil levels, and scrape wax from the stone floor where it's dripped like fat snowflakes. Your fingers are still cold, but your stomach no longer growls, and the silence now feels softer, like cloth instead of stone. You catch your reflection in a dark window. The tonsure still shocks you, a ring of fuzz circling a pale shaved crown. You look older, monkish, like a man halfway erased, but under that reflection, something steadier stares back. You're not sure yet if it's you or someone you're becoming. Compline comes, then the sacred silence of the night. You crawl back to your cell. This time, the straw doesn't itch quite as much. Or maybe you're too tired to care. You pull your robe tighter, lie down, and breathe in the deep, still air. Outside, the moon hangs over the abbey like a soft candle in the sky, and inside, you sleep until the bell remembers you again. It's confession day. You find out the moment a young novice knocks lightly on your door, lowers his eyes, and hands you a small wooden plaque with a carved Latin phrase. It reads, Confessio hebdomalis, weekly confession. Your stomach drops, faster than your faith in straw mattresses. You knew it was coming. Every monk is required to confess his sins at least once a week, but what no one told you was how bizarrely specific these confessions could get. You're not just expected to admit that you lost your temper or took an extra chunk of bread. Oh no. This is a full audit of your soul. Did you experience pride when you copied your Latin better than Brother Thomas? Did you imagine a warm bed and accidentally enjoy the idea too much? Did you laugh internally when the abbot tripped on his robe? You have to confess all of it. And here's the kicker: if you have no sins to confess, that's considered suspicious. Not because you're pure, but because you're probably hiding something, or worse, unaware of your own wickedness, which is, in itself, a sin. Mainstream historical fact. Confession in monastic communities wasn't just about major moral failures, it was about vigilance, humility, and a kind of internal surveillance that would make even Orwell squirm. Some monks confessed their dreams, their thoughts, their temptations to think. You trudge to the small wooden confessional near the back of the cloister garden. It's not like modern ones: no curtains, no privacy. Just a bench, a senior monk with a stern brow, and a long pause as you fumble through what you might have done wrong in the past 7 days. You start small, I grew impatient during copying. The monk nods. Silent. You pause. Then try again. I envied Brother Alred's ability to chant without going flat. Still silence. You glance at the ground. You remember something worse. I thought about cheese, with longing. Now the monk speaks. You must recite 10 psalms, barefoot. In the outer cloister walk, tonight? You nod. Fair. Fringe tidbit. In some particularly strict orders, like the Carthusians, monks had to perform confession daily, and the sin list often included physical habits, scratching too much, blinking too dramatically, sneezing during prayer. There were actual manuals listing common monastic offenses, complete with their penances. Imagine a spiritual user manual titled, "So You Sinned." A monastic troubleshooting guide. After confession, you head to the cloister corridor, sandals off, souls meeting cold stone. You begin your psalms. Each verse echoes slightly against the stone pillars. You whisper them low, voice a hoarse rasp in the evening air. As you chant, a wind drifts through the open archways, carrying the scent of old wax, distant herbs, and a hint of animals somewhere nearby. Monastic life isn't sterile, it smells very much alive. Too alive, sometimes, you begin to lose track of the verses. The repetition wraps around your mind like soft rope soothing, almost hypnotic. In some strange way, the psalms begin to calm you. Not because you understand every line, but because they give your brain a job to do. A rhythm to cling to. By the 10th psalm, your knees are stiff, and your lips are dry. But something inside has shifted. You feel emptied. Not in a dramatic, movie-redeeming way, lighter. Like maybe you dropped a few things you didn't. No, you were carrying. Historians still debate whether medieval confession was more about spiritual healing or institutional control, probably both. Confession created an emotional release valve, but it also kept monks humble, compliant, and terrified of internal rebellion. You slip back into your sandals, grateful for their questionable padding. It's nearly Compline again, and the sky has dipped into violet dusk. Bats flicker past the upper windows, little shadows with tiny teeth, like sign with wings. Dinner is meat, a bowl of thin broth, and a corner of bread that looks like it was once dropped and blessed by accident. You eat slowly, silently, and glance sideways at Brother Alred, who is back at the table today after his public penance. He looks tired. He also looks oddly at peace. After dinner, one of the elder monks stands and recites a reflection about Saint Anthony, who once spent 20 years alone in the desert to fight temptation. 20 years. Alone, with demons, lizards, and his own thoughts. Suddenly, the cloister walls seem cozy. You wonder if Anthony ever confessed to longing for cheese. Back in your cell, the silence deepens. Your candle is nearly gone. You write a few shaky lines of copied Latin before snuffing it out and lying down. Your scalp still prickles. Your bones are sore, and your soul, slightly more confessed than before. You close your eyes. In the distance, a bell rings for another monk's penance. And tomorrow, you'll start sinning again. Not because you want to, but because here, even thinking is dangerous. You wake up sore not from sleep, but from penance. Your feet still sting from last night's barefoot walk along the cold cloister stones. There's a blister forming under your right big toe, a throbbing reminder that spirituality, in this place, is not a cozy fireside chat with the divine. It's more of a daily, low-grade survival test with prayer breaks. And today, your lesson isn't about language or scripture, it's about punishment, not spiritual discipline, not philosophical correction. Literal, physical, uncomfortable punishment. After prime, the morning prayer, a novice gestures silently for you to follow him into the chapter house. You walk behind him, robes swishing across the chilled stone. The sun is just peeking through narrow windows, casting pale stripes of light across the dust-filled air. Inside, several monks are already seated on benches around the circular stone room. The abbot sits on a slightly raised platform, expression unreadable. Another monk stands alone at the center, head bowed. Brother Senric. You've seen him in the scriptorium. He's the one who always finishes his work a bit too quickly, efficient, precise, maybe a little smug about it. Apparently, to smug, the abbot announces, Brother Senric failed to correct his posture during the midday psalm. He showed impatience and broke silence by coughing repeatedly. You blink. Coughing. Yes, in a monastery where self-control is currency, even involuntary noises can be considered resistance or, worse, pride. Coughing during prayer might suggest that you're not fully present, or not trying hard enough, or letting your body dictate your behavior instead of your will. And punishment. Here isn't one-size-fits-all. Brother Senric. It's the discipline cord. The fringe tidbit. Many monastic orders wore a rope around the waist, not just as a symbol of humility, but as a tool of correction. Known as a discipline, it was a knotted cord or thin leather strap used for self-flagellation, or when necessary by a superior. In some monasteries, monks whipped themselves during Lent. In others, punishment was carried out in groups. The sound of cord striking flesh, muffled by chant. Brother Senric is told to kneel. He does, without a word. Another monk steps forward, unwinds the rope from around his waist, and delivers 3 quick strikes to his back. Nothing violent, but nothing gentle either. The room stays silent. No one winces. No one comments. You, however, feel your stomach twist, because you know your turn will come. Mainstream historical fact. Monastic punishment was often tailored to the rule violated. Laziness, more labor, arrogance, public humiliation, disobedience, silence that could last hours, days, even weeks. Your mind flashes back to the scribal error you made yesterday. You corrected it quickly, but what if someone saw it? Before you fixed it, you swallow hard. Later that day, during garden labor, you keep your head down and hands busy. You pull weeds like your salvation depends on it. Maybe it does, but the silence isn't soothing. Today it's tense, like the whole monastery is holding its breath, waiting for someone to slip up. You watch as Brother Alred accidentally drops a wooden bucket. It clatters against the stone, echoing like a shout. He freezes. Everyone else freezes. But no one says a word. Not out loud, anyway. That's part of the game here. The silence isn't empty. It's full of judgment, of stares, of things unspoken, but very understood. In the refectory at midday, you eat your simple meal bread, weak broth, and a slice of what might be pickled beetroot. Brother Alred kneels near the door. Again, silent, punished for the bucket. No one looks at him. You don't chew too loudly. You don't blink too fast. You certainly don't cough. Afterward, during sext, you notice your knees have begun to harden. The skin is callousing from so much kneeling. Your back aches constantly now, but you try not to shift during prayer. Movement equals distraction. Distraction equals weakness. Weakness equals sin. Historians still argue whether such severity was necessary or whether it created more guilt than grace. Some say it built a spiritual fortress within the soul. Others suggest it simply suppressed everything human until nothing remained but obedience. You're starting to suspect both are true. The strangest part, you find yourself hoping you do get punished. Just once. Just enough to get it over with. Because right now, the not knowing, the constant fear of slipping is worse than the whip itself. Evening comes. You light candles in the chapel before Vespers. Their small flames sway slightly in the wind, coming through a crack in the window. You think of how fragile light is here, how much darkness presses in. You sing your part in the psalm quietly, almost tonelessly, not from defiance, just fatigue. After Compline, you return to your cell. A note has been left on your door. A carved plaque, really, no writing, just a single shallow groove along the wood. You've heard of this. It means observation. Someone noticed something. No one will say what, but tomorrow, the abbot might, and that might mean penance, or silence. Or worse, you close your door, you sit on your bed, the straw rustles like dry leaves, and in the heavy dark, the only thing louder than the silence is your imagination. Morning comes with no answers, only another bell. You wake with the faint imprint of straw against your cheek, and the wooden plaque still propped beside your door. The groove carved into it stares back at you like a single accusing eye. Observation. That's all it says, and yet it says everything. You dress in silence, stomach tight. Was it your posture during prayer? Did you mutter during transcription? Did someone hear your stomach growl and interpret it as spiritual rebellion? You don't know, and you won't be told unless the abbot decides you need to know. That's the genius of the system. It's self-regulating. The fear of being watched is often more effective than actual punishment. You file into chapel for lauds. You chant one beat behind the others. You keep your head lower than usual, eyes down, shoulders in, a perfect shadow. Still, you feel heat creeping up your neck, like someone, somewhere, is watching. After prayers, you're sent to the garden, not to weed or water, but to carry compost. A wooden yoke is placed over your shoulders, buckets on either side, filled with what smells like humility and last week's turnips. It's not glamorous, but it's not penance either. At least, not officially. As you walk the narrow path between the rows of beans and onions, you pass Brother Senric. He doesn't meet your eye, just nods once, very slightly. A warning, solidarity, or perhaps nothing at all. You can no longer read people here. Everyone has the same face, neutral, obedient, vaguely tired. You dump the compost behind the wall. You return, you repeat. All morning. At midday, as you prepare for sext prayers, a novice appears and taps your shoulder. He hands you a folded piece of parchment. Your name is not on it because you no longer have a name, but you understand what it means. You've been summoned. You follow the novice silently, heart thudding against your ribs like a misplaced drumbeat. He leads you past the scriptorium, past the kitchens, into a narrow corridor that ends in a wooden door carved with a small cross. The abbot's quarters. You enter. The room is dim, warm, and smells of old paper and pine resin. A single candle burns on the table. The abbot gestures for you to sit on a small stool. You do. He doesn't speak right away. He studies you like a problem he's trying to solve without using too much ink. Then finally, Brother Dominic, why are you here? It's not a riddle, it's not a trap, it's a test. A spiritual pop quiz, and you have no study guide. You fumble an answer, to serve God, to learn the rule, to submit. The abbot raises an eyebrow, not in disapproval, more like, continue. You swallow, to be emptied of myself, and made useful. He nods, slowly, then asks, and what stands in your way? This time, you're honest. My thoughts, my desires, my habits. You think of comfort, of control, of the quiet act of wanting something in a place where you're not allowed to want anything. He says nothing, just rises, opens a small drawer, and removes a thin, knotted rope, not raised, not threatened, just shown. A symbol. Obedience, he says softly, is not the absence of desire. It is the mastery of it. Then he dismisses you. No punishment, no accusation. Just the reminder that here you don't get a say in anything. You return to your tasks with a strange sensation, not relief. Exactly, something more numbing. Like the ground has stopped shaking, but you still don't trust your legs. Mainstream. Historical fact. Monastic obedience was more than following orders. It was considered a holy virtue. The abbot's will was God's will. Questioning authority even silently was seen as a crack in your spiritual armor. And fringe detail, some orders enforced radical obedience drills. Monks would be ordered to perform bizarre, pointless tasks like watering a dry stone or moving a log from one place to another, repeatedly just to prove their submission. Like medieval trustfalls, but, with more guilt. After Vespers, you copy scripture. Tonight, it's from Ecclesiastes to everything there is a season. You wonder if there's a season for escape. Not that you'd try, because even thinking about rebellion here feels like trying to exhale in a room without air. Later. At Compline, you kneel and chant with the rest. Your voice is steady now. Your posture perfect. But inside, you begin to hollow out a little, not from fear, not from punishment, from the quiet erasure of choice. And that more than the fasting, more than the silence, more than the blisters, is what makes monastic life so unbearable for the modern soul. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not choose, you submit. Always, and the worst part, you're starting to get good at it. The morning starts with ink under your fingernails. You're back in the scriptorium. Your signed labor for the day on today. You are granted the privilege of copying an actual page from the Book of Psalms. No more wax tablets or training slates. This is parchment, real vellum, made from a very real, very formerly alive sheep. The master of the scriptorium hands you a sheet with reverence. It is cream-colored, soft, and smells faintly of smoke and history. You are to copy the Latin. Exactly one mistake, and the page must be scraped clean or discarded entirely. Parchment is valuable. Mistakes are not. You sit at your bench, dip your quill into the ink, and begin. Beatos verquae non abiet in concilio impiorum. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, and blessed, apparently, is the monk who can manage to write in a straight line without blotting the page with his elbow. Your hands are already cold. Your spine curves forward like an anxious question mark. The ink smells like iron and vinegar, and the candle beside you hisses softly with every flicker of air. There's no backspace here. No CTRL plus Z. Only total focus and the faint threat of starting over. Mainstream. Historical fact. Medieval monks were the primary preservers of ancient texts. Without them, many classical works, Cicero, Aristotle, early Christian writings, have been lost. They copied everything by hand. With precision, with discipline, with the kind of patience you've only previously applied to slow Wi-Fi connections. You write, you blot, you fix it. You write again. Fringe tidbit. Some monks developed their own shorthand to make copying faster, secret squiggles and loops known only within certain abbeys. These weren't always approved by higher clergy, so using them too liberally could result in reprimand or reassignment. To manure duty, at your left, Brother Alred is halfway through a psalm. His handwriting is immaculate. He works like a man who doesn't even breathe between letters. On your right, Brother Senric mutters under his breath every time his ink dries up too quickly. He's definitely skating the edge of another silent penance. A bell tolls. You don't move. You're in the middle of a sentence. You finish it carefully, blow gently on the ink, and rise with the others for terse. After prayer, you return to find a small mistake on your page. An extra flick of the pen on a T, barely visible. But it is visible. You stare at it like it insulted your mother. You know what you're supposed to do. You lift your knife a small, dull blade used exactly for this purpose, and gently scrape the ink from the surface of the vellum. The hair-thin line disappears. Slowly, grain by grain. You try not to slice the page. You try not to cry. This is your third scrape today. You wonder, not for the first time, how many monks just gave up. How many buried half-finished pages in the garden, or tucked errors beneath their robes to avoid being seen as careless. Historians still debate whether scriptorium productivity records were exaggerated to please visiting bishops. Probably you write for hours. The candle beside you burns low, pooling wax at its base in a little golden puddle of holy exhaustion. Your quill splits once and must be trimmed with a penknife. The master scribes don't help. You're expected to figure it out. Like everything else, at midday, you finally stop. You stretch your fingers and realize they are cramped into a claw-like pose that may or may not be permanent. You stumble into the refectory, head spinning slightly from ink fumes, and the total silence of the scriptorium. Lunch is the usual broth. Bread and scripture, you chew while listening to a reading from the lives of the Desert Fathers monks who lived in caves, ate bugs, and achieved spiritual enlightenment by meditating in sandstorms. You, on the other hand, are still working on not smudging your D's. After the meal, you return to the scriptorium. Another page awaits. This time, it's a genealogy. Long lists of names, most of which you can't pronounce, all in Latin. All with diacritical marks you must get right or face another redo. The scriptorium master passes behind you, pauses, and says, "Slant." You freeze. He means your lettering is leaning. You try to correct it, steady your hand, flatten the letters like obedient children. You lose track of time. Again the light fades slowly. The work, DOESN, single quotes, D. By the time Vespers rolls around, your fingers have ink in every crease, and your shoulders feel like they belong to someone 3 decades older. You chant the Psalms quietly, the words now etched into your memory, simply from copying them so many times. The scriptorium has done something to your mind. You see lines in patterns now, paragraphs in shadows. The scratch of quill echoes in your thoughts, even in silence. You crawl into bed later that night with ink on your robes, a faint twitch in your right thumb, and a quiet understanding that tomorrow will bring more of the same. You think of writing something just for yourself, but here, that's not allowed. Your pen serves God, not you. Today's lesson begins with a warning. Guard your eyes, brother. It's said quietly by one of the older monks, Brother Malchus, just before you pass through the inner cloister on your way to morning prayers. You glance at him, confused. He doesn't explain, just keeps walking. It isn't until later, during a brief break after prime, that the meaning becomes clear. A group of pilgrims has arrived. That's not unusual. The abbey sits along a small but holy route, and from time to time travelers, seeking healing, blessings, or divine answers pass through. They come dusty and weary, bearing tokens for the altars, more coins, broken teeth, locks of hair. But today, in the group, there are women, and in this monastery, that is a problem. You're in the garden courtyard, watering rows of medicinal herbs, when the group passes through the outer cloister. A young woman in a pale shawl turns her head slightly and meets your gaze just for a second. Her face is sunburned and wind-chapped, her eyes wide with exhaustion. You look away immediately, but it's too late. The rule of Saint Benedict is clear. You are to flee women as if they were a burning flame. This applies not just to lust, but to presence. Even your own mother or sister is considered a spiritual risk. Some orders, especially the stricter Cluniacs banned monks, from even writing the word. Feminine. Mainstream historical fact. Monasteries in the High Middle Ages enforced strict physical and visual separation between monks and women. In many cases, women were not even permitted within the outer walls of the abbey. If they had to deliver something, they'd pass it through a turntable, like a medieval lazy Susan designed to prevent temptation. Fringe detail. Some abbeys required monks to walk with their hoods partially over their eyes if women were within 50 feet. One order even encouraged monks to wear blinkers, like horses during public feast days. You keep your eyes low as the pilgrims are welcomed, quietly, by the porter. You return to your labor with twice the concentration, but your mind is spinning. Not with desire, necessarily though, yes. It has been a while since you saw a human face that didn't have a beard and chronic sun exposure, but with the sheer pressure. Because you now understand that even thinking is dangerous. Later, during sext, you find yourself praying harder. Not because you're moved by the psalm, but because your brain won't stop replaying that half-second glance. Not with longing, with guilt. That's the design. Desire here doesn't need to become action to be punished. It simply needs to exist. And you begin to see how fear seeps into your very thoughts, how you censor yourself before you even speak, how your imagination is no longer your own. After 60, the abbot delivers a short admonition in the chapter house. He doesn't mention you. He doesn't mention the pilgrims. He simply says, "Guard your gates, brothers." The eye is the doorway to pride, and pride is the ladder to sin. Then he leaves the room, robes whispering behind him like a departing storm. That night, in your cell, you try to write out a verse to calm your mind. Just a simple psalm line, over and over. Turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity, but your hand shakes. Not from fear, from fatigue, from the constant pressure to not feel anything that isn't holy, plain, and fully approved. Historians still argue whether monastic restrictions on contact with women were about purity or power. Probably both. Removing human connection is to women were seen as a path to clarity, but also as a way to keep monks dependent on the order, and not on anything or anyone outside it. You think of the woman's eyes, again, they weren't flirtatious. They weren't seductive. They were tired, just like yours. You lie down on your sack of straw, eyes burning from candlelight and emotion. You close them tight, but her gaze stays with you. And the worst part, you don't even know her name. And that, in this place, might be the point. Privacy doesn't exist here. That's something you understood, in theory, when you joined, but today, it becomes painfully real. You wake before the bell. Not because you're eager, but because your bladder is threatening to declare a state of emergency. You stumble out of your cell, trying to be quiet. Robe, wrapped tightly around you in the cold dawn air. The latrine is down a narrow hall, near the edge of the garden wall. You follow the scent knot, fresh, not floraland, arrive at what the monks call the red, a quaint little word that masks what is, in essence, a communal trench over running water. It is not serene. The structure is little more than a roofed stone corridor built over a drainage channel. Wooden planks with keyhole-shaped openings are spaced along either side, no partitions, no doors, no illusions. You sit or hover. Depending on the condition of the wood, and immediately regret every decision that brought you here. The smell is what you'd expect from 20 men eating turnips and barley on a loop. The sounds are worse. You try to hum quietly to distract yourself, but remember, humming is frowned upon. And toilet paper? Ah, no. What you get is a shared stick, a communal sponge on a pole, known affectionately or fearfully in some places as a gomphif. It's soaked in vinegar or salt water, which is supposed to be antiseptic. You stare at it like it's a live animal. Mainstream historical fact, medieval. Monastic latrines were built with running water from nearby streams. A surprisingly advanced bit of hygiene infrastructure for the time. But the absence of privacy and reliance on shared implements often made illness and infection common in large monasteries. Fringe tidbit. Some monasteries had toilet monks assigned brothers responsible for cleaning and maintaining the reredorta, a prestigious position. This was not. There are records of monks volunteering for latrine duty as penance, or being volunteered after falling asleep during prayers. You finish your business as quickly as dignity allows. No one speaks in the reredorta, but glances happen, and coughs, and that one old monk who breathes a little too loudly. You wash your hands in a cold basin outside, no soap, just water and frost, and make your way back through the garden, slightly hollowed by the experience. At breakfast, you're quieter than usual, which is impressive because everyone is quiet. Bread and a thin root stew. The monk opposite you chews with the grim concentration of someone reliving a spiritual trauma. You suspect he also visited the reredorta this morning, after the meal. You return to the scriptorium, hands still raw from the water basin. Today's assignment, a page from Leviticus. You try not to read it too closely. Some of the passages about bodily functions hit a little too close to home. Around midday, the bell rings, and you are reassigned this time to water fetching duty. You carry 2 large ceramic jugs and walk with another novice down to the stream. It's a half-mile outside the walls, along a dirt path that winds through scrubby grass and gnarled trees. It's the first time you've left the monastery proper. In over a week, the silence out here is different. It's natural. Birds chirp, wind rattles, dry leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. You feel your lungs expand in a way they haven't since arriving. A part of you wants to run. Not to escape, just to move freely. But instead, you fill the jugs with cold water and turn back. Halfway up the hill, your companion slips. His jug cracks against a rock. Water spills. You freeze, because now you both have to go back, not because you want to help, because that's the rule. Everything is shared. Here labor, blame, and inconvenience. You return late and wet, and you get no sympathy. Historians still debate whether the strict communal nature of monastic life was effective at fostering true unity, or if it bred silent resentment and subtle rebellion. Likely both. Monasteries where privacy was forbidden monks learn to wear emotional armor stronger than CHAINMAIL. At Vespers, you chant with a sore back and wet sleeves. After prayers, you dry your feet by the kitchen hearth, while another monk stirs tomorrow's soup. It smells exactly the same as today's, because it is the same. This is not a culinary monastery. No herb gardens arranged for flavor. Just fuel. As you sit near the fire, Brother Melkus joins you. He doesn't speak, but offers a torn piece of bread from his own bowl. You take it, dip it in the hot broth. Eat slowly. It's the first warm thing you've experienced all day. That night, back in your cell, you light a candle, unwrap your small wax tablet, and scrawl a few words just for yourself. Even in silence. I remain. You scrape the words clean before blowing out the flame, because privacy doesn't exist here. Not even in your own mind. You haven't laughed in 13 days. Not a chuckle, not a snort, not even the brief, airless puff you used to make when a joke surprised you. And it's not because nothing's funny-o, plenty is. Like the way Brother Senric keeps falling, asleep mid-chant, and jolting awake with a sound like a goose hiccuping. Or how Brother Alred once dropped a whole bowl of lentils and instinctively shushed them as they scattered. It's funny, but here, you're not allowed to laugh? Not really. Laughter, in this place, is seen as prideful, as undisciplined, as a lapse in control. The rule of Saint Benedict warns monks to avoid loud laughter, advising that only a gentle smile is appropriate. Joy should be internal, private, and even then, mostly directed toward God, not toward your friend who accidentally blessed a goat. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval monastic communities, particularly the stricter Benedictine and orders, laughter was discouraged as a sign of frivolity. Silence wasn't just a way to focus, it was a way to avoid slipping into the childish amusements of the flesh. You, meanwhile, are starting to forget what your own laugh sounds like. It starts to itch at you, not unlike the straw in your matros. When something absurd happens, Ando, it does. You have to press your lips together so tightly they go white. It's like trying to sneeze in a library made of judgment today. It almost happens. During the noonday meal, the reader is deep into a hagiography of saint's life story, and it's the usual mix of miracles and moral instruction, until he gets to the part where Saint Guthlac casts out a demon by yelling at it in Old English and throwing his shoe. You glance at Brother Melkus, his mouth twitches. A millimeter, maybe less. You look away. You chew your bread like it wronged you. Your shoulders shake for half a second. Internally, you're screaming. But externally, stone, fringe tidbit. Some monasteries kept what was called a laughter log, an unofficial record or whispered memory of moments when monks broke the sacred quiet with inappropriate mirth. These moments were both taboo and legendary. A fart during Vespers could echo for years. That's what this place does to you. It turns the tiniest outburst into an unforgettable scandal. You start fearing not just your sins, but your giggles. It's emotional surveillance, wrapped in wool robes. After the meal, you walk silently to the scriptorium. On the way, you pass Brother Senric again, who is struggling with a large clay inkpot. It slips from his hands, wobbles, and falls. Somehow, it doesn't break, but the splash covers his robe in a perfect reverse crucifix pattern. It's objectively hilarious. You feel the laugh clawing at your throat like a trapped animal. You swallow it so hard, your ears pop. Later, at Vespers, you kneel next to Brother Alred. His stomach makes a noise so loud and gurgly, it sounds like a drowning bagpipe. No one moves. No one laughs, but a novice 2 rows over bites his lips so hard. You see a single tear slide down his cheek. The suppression becomes a kind of sport by the time you get back to your cell. The need to laugh has turned into a strange, fizzy energy. In your chest, you lie in the dark and think of things that used to be funny. Silly songs. Your uncle trying to parallel park a wagon. A goose chasing a bishop during a harvest blessing. You smile, and even that feels dangerous. Historians still argue whether laughter's suppression in monasteries was about promoting humility or simply about control. Joy, after all, is powerful. It bonds people. It's hard to manipulate a man who's grinning. So maybe it had to be trimmed, like an unruly hedge. The next morning, during lulls, something finally breaks. The cantor's voice cracks mid-chant like a teenage boy possessed by a yodeling spirit. It rings through the chapel like a trumpet full of bees. There is silence, then a cough, then a faint wheeze. Then someone you don't know who snorts. Just once. Sharp and involuntary, like a secret. Escaping it's over in a flash. The abbot's head turns. Slowly. No one breathes. The cantor continues, red-faced as if nothing happened. The snorer, unidentified. But now everyone is sharper, quieter. As if joy itself is a loose thread we're all too afraid to pull. You return to your cell that night. Light your candle, and scratch this into your wax tablet. Today, the silence almost cracked. Then you erase it. Because even joy must be hidden here, and laughter. That's for God to allow, or punish. You wake to the sound of coughing deep, raw, and constant. Not yours. Brother Malchus, you've grown used to his quiet presence. His habit of handing you bits of extra bread without comment, or whispering the occasional line from the rule when you forget what's next in the sequence of prayers. But this morning, his cell door is ajar, and his cough is echoing through the corridor like the toll of a cracked bell. You pause outside his door. For a moment, you wonder if you should enter, but you don't, because here, illness is not a reason to break the rules. You go to Lord's, chanting next to an empty spot. His absence is not acknowledged. No one speaks of it. He is not sick, not officially, he is simply not here. In the world beyond the monastery, someone would have checked on him by now. A doctor, a nurse, a friend. But here, illness is considered a spiritual trial, and often a test. Mainstream historical fact, medieval monks believed disease was often divine punishment, or at the very least, a purification of the soul. Illness was endured, not treated. Prayer was the first prescription. Everything else was a distant second. That said, there were treatments. Sort of. After prime, you're sent to assist in the infirmary, a dark, low room tucked behind the apothecary. Garda Brother Odo is the monk in charge. He's ancient, half-deaf, and smells of rosemary and something burnt. You're told to grind dried herbs in a mortar and pestle while he mutters instructions under his breath. The mixture includes horehound, licorice root, and vinegar. It's meant for coughs, or fevers, or demons, depending on whom you ask. He passes you a pot of salve with a look that says, "Do not ask questions," and gestures toward the hallway. You find Brother Malchus lying on a thin pallet in the corner, barely visible under a woolen blanket. His skin is pale, and his breathing sounds like sandpaper dragged over stone. You kneel beside him, rub the salve gently onto his chest. He opens his eyes briefly and smiles just barely. You say nothing, because here, even comfort must be quiet. Fringe. Tidbit. Monasteries often kept leeches. Yes, the little bloodsuckers. They were used to rebalance the humors. The medieval idea that health was a matter of bodily fluids being in harmony. Too much phlegm, too little bile. Let's just bleed you until you're humble and hopefully conscious. You spot a jar of them on a shelf. The leeches twitch lazily in their glass prison, like they're waiting for sin to walk in that night. Brother Malchus doesn't come to Comlin. No one asks about him. Not out loud. You kneel. Chant. Bow. Rise. Your movements so familiar now. They're almost automatic. But your mind drifts. You wonder what happens if a monk dies in the night. Does someone check on them? Or do they just go quietly? There's a passage in the rule that says a brother should accept death as he accepts the will of the abbot. That's the level of surrender expected here. Later, you return to the infirmary. No one stops you. Maybe the silence is a kind of permission. Brother Malchus is asleep, or unconscious. His breath rattles, slow and shallow. You sit beside him on the cold floor, whispering a line from today's psalm. Not for you, for him. In te, Domini, in you, O Lord, I have placed my trust. You don't cry, because crying, like laughter, is suspect. Historians still debate whether monastic medicine helped or harmed more than it healed. Records show that monks often lived longer than lay people. They also endured treatments that bordered on mystical guesswork. Faith helped, but so did not dying of a simple infection. You fall asleep against the wall, robes pulled tight, candle flickering low in the early morning. The infirmarian finds you and says only one word, gone. No name, no wail of grief, no litany of virtues, just gone. At Lodz, brother, Malchus's place is still empty. The chant continues. The bell tolls, the rule remains. And in your wax tablet, that night, you carve a line you know you'll erase before matins. He gave me bread when no one else saw. You stare at it, then blow out the candle, because even death must not disturb the silence. You are standing in the chapel again. This time, with a hymnal in your hands. Not that you need it. The chants are etched into your brain now, woven deep like the smell of beeswax into these stones. You could sing them in your sleep. And, judging by how little sleep you actually get, you probably have. Today's hymn is longer than usual, a droning plainsong that climbs and falls like a careful breath. The chapel is filled with the low murmur of 40 tired voices doing their best not to go flat. You are one of them. And you, dear brother Dominic, are tone deaf. There is no kind way to say this. You sing like a person who understands music only in theory and vowels only by guesswork. Every phrase is a gamble, every note an invitation to spiritual disaster, and yet you must sing every day, because here the choir isn't optional. It is sacred labor. It is your part in the liturgy of the hours, an unbroken chain of prayer and praise, rising like incense. Your voice may wobble, it may clash, but it must be heard. Mainstream historical fact: Gregorian chant was the dominant musical tradition in medieval monastic life. The melodies were modal, simple in structure, but demanding in precision. Each monk was expected to participate. Talent was not required, only obedience and reverence. Fringe tidbit: some monasteries kept a corrections monk, a brother trained to recognize flat notes, dragged syllables, or unholy tempo changes. He'd tap the offending singer lightly with a reed or cough disapprovingly, in rhythm with your mistake. Original music critic: you haven't been tapped yet, but you've been eyed. Today, you notice brother Alred, 3 seats down, twitching at your rendering of Dominus Deus. Whether it's from your pitch or his stomach, you're unsure. Still, you push through, because not singing is worse. Silence during choir means something is wrong. A sore throat might be acceptable. A broken spirit, that's far more serious. After the service, you're sent with a group to clean the choir loft and narrow balcony. Above the chapel, where sacred books and music scrolls are stored, it's dusty, cold, a haven for cobwebs and forgotten notes. You help roll and shelve the scrolls, each lined with square early musical notation, like tiny calligraphic bricks arranged on 4-line staves. You marvel at the precision. The ink is faded, but the melodies are eternal. You wonder how many tired monks have sung these same notes before you. How many butchered that same awkward interval. As you sort through the scrolls, brother Senric snorts softly at one marked feast of Saint Hildegard. He mutters, "She composed better than we ever chant." You glance at him. Did he just praise a woman? He must see the flicker in your expression, because he quickly adds, "Only musically." Of course, you both return to stacking scrolls after the loft is cleaned. You're given a strange assignment. Stand behind the novice cantor and hold the pitch pipe. Not a pipe. Exactly a kind of tuned whistle carved from bone and horn. Its tone is harsh, nasal, but pure. The cantor uses it to find the starting note. You are to hold it. That's all. But your hands are shaking, because if you drop it God forbid, blow it wrong, you'll be starting the next chant, half a note off, and the whole abbey will spiral into vocal chaos. It's Gregorian chant's version of launching a crooked space shuttle. You manage. Barely. The chant begins, slow, deep, ancient. You join in, and, for once, You don't think about your voice, you just sing. It's off-key. Your neighbor winces. Once. But no reed taps your shoulder. Later, at dinner, no one mentions the chant. That means it wasn't disastrous. A victory. You eat your bread with a newfound dignity. Even if it tastes like old dust. Historians still argue whether monastic chanting was a form of shared spiritual ecstasy or just glorified sleep prevention. Some monks recorded visions during song, others confessed to zoning out entirely, moving their mouths while thinking about soup. You're somewhere in the middle. That night, before Compline, you find yourself humming under your breath in the hallway. A soft, harmless phrase, just a note or two. Until Brother Senric walks past and mutters, "Still sharp." You both grin. Very slightly, it's the closest thing to friendship you've had in weeks, and as you kneel for the final prayer of the day, your voice joins the others, not because you believe in your note, but because you believe in the act of it. You chant. Off-key, off-balance, but never silent. You reach for a book, not for copying, not for chanting, but because you're curious. And that, in this place, is delicate. The monastery's library is cool and dim, lined with narrow shelves and guarded by silence stricter than the cloister. While you've been granted access for study supervised, of course, a senior monk watches from the corner, thumbing through a theological treatise with all the enthusiasm of a stone. Gargoyle. Your task today is to assist in inventorying the library scrolls and codices. That sounds simple. It eyes in single quotes. First, everything is chained. Literally, each book is bound to the shelf with an iron chain, long enough to lift and read, but not far enough to walk away with. Some chains are so rusted, they squeak like guilt. Others don't move at all, their iron links stiff with centuries of disuse. This isn't about theft. Not exactly. It's about control. Books are power. And in the monastery, power is not yours. Mainstream, historical fact, medieval monastic libraries were among the most advanced knowledge repositories in Europe, but access was tightly restricted. Only certain monks could read freely. Others needed permission, a supervisor, or a strict reading list. Books weren't there to entertain. They were there to shape you. You lift a volume gently. Its title, written in faded Latin, translates roughly to "On the Weight of the Soul." The pages are calfskin. The script is Gothic, tight, and neat. Margins are filled with tiny, spidery notes. Previous monks, arguing with dead authors in the margins. One comment reads simply, "False pride." Another, "Dangerous logic, warn Brother Edric," fringe tidbit. Some abbeys maintained book prisons, locked boxes, or high shelves containing works deemed suspect, heretical, or overly philosophical. Reading without permission could result in discipline, silence, or even reassignment to farm labor. That's right, too much thinking could get you sent to the turnip fields. As you scan the shelf, one book catches your eye. It's smaller than the others, bound in soft leather, and, unlike the rest, unchained. You glance at the supervising monk. He's dozing. You slide the book free. No title on the spine. You open the cover. The first page reads, "On the Imaginings of the Mind," and beneath that, anonymous. You turn a page, then another. This isn't theology, it's dreams, metaphors, symbols, strange, poetic musings on stars, rivers, birds that sing in languages only the dead understand. Nothing doctrinal, nothing rigid, just ideas. Floating. Your fingers tremble, because this feels like feeling, and you haven't done that in a while. You don't get far. The supervising monk shifts, mutters something about Augustine, and your guilt slams the book shut like a trapdoor. You replace it, but your heart keeps reading. After the inventory, you're sent back to the scriptorium, but the thoughts won't leave. Not about the book itself, but that someone in here wrote it. Some monk, like you, once broke the mold. Once thought outside the rule, once dared to write down his own thoughts. That's both terrifying and thrilling. You scratch your quill across the page of your assigned psalm, but now the rhythm is off. The words don't feel the same. You're still writing their words, but part of you is thinking your own, and that, in this place, is the beginning of danger. Historians still argue whether monastic censorship was about preserving truth or suppressing creativity. Some monasteries allowed intellectual exploration within limits. Others feared it, because a curious monk was a questioning monk. And a questioning monk could unravel the whole rule. At Vespers, the chanting feels tighter. You notice how every voice matches. Every syllable lands like clockwork. It's beautiful. But now you also see the cost. Nothing in that chapel is spontaneous. It's memorized, measured, controlled. Later, back in your cell, you scratch a single line into your wax tablet just to see how it feels. If I think alone, is it still a sin? Stare at it, then scrape it clean, because you know the answer. Here, obedience means silence and curiosity. That's chained to a shelf. You start to notice something unsettling. You're being watched. Not in the overt, torch-bearing mob way. This is subtler, softer. It's the way Brother Senric pauses a second too long when passing your cell. How the abbot's gaze lingers an extra breath during readings. How even Brother Alred, normally the very image of weary indifference, has started looking through you instead of at you. It began. You think, after the library, you didn't take the book, you didn't copy it, you didn't even whisper its title, but something must have shown in your face some flicker of thought that wasn't perfectly shaped like a psalm. And here, thoughts are rarely private for long. The monastery works like a system of mirrors. Everyone reflects everyone else. One tilt of the head, one missed bow, one too long glance at the stars, and, suddenly, whispers begin. You return to your duties with renewed diligence. Scrubbing floors, copying pages, chanting psalms as though your voice might seal the cracks in your soul. But the eyes are still there, watching, waiting. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval monasteries, especially under the Cluniac and Carthusian reforms, a culture of peer observation was encouraged. Monks were expected to monitor one another, not out of malice, but as a safeguard for spiritual purity. Gossip wasn't exactly allowed, but reporting was. Fringe tidbit. Some abbeys even employed silent auditors, monks specifically tasked with eavesdropping during recreation, labor, and even prayer, to ensure no forbidden thoughts or sympathies took root. In some ways, they were the monastic equivalent of internal affairs. After none, you're sent to clean the cloister walk. You scrub stone tiles on your knees with a rag soaked in diluted lye, the fumes curling up into your sinuses like punishment. Brother Alred passes behind you, stops. You're too quiet lately, he says, almost kindly. That's usually a sign. You look up. A sign of what? He only smiles. Doesn't matter. You'll find out. Or they will. Then he walks away. You try to shake it off. But that night, while you chant Compline, your voice falters. Just slightly. Just once. But enough. The next day, your schedule changes. No scriptorium. You're assigned to the kitchens. A punishment? A rotation? No one explains. And you've learned by now not to ask. Questions are stones thrown into still water. They ripple outward. The kitchen is warm, at least. Hot ovens. Bubbling pots. Steam curling along soot-dark rafters. You spend the morning peeling roots. Not potatoes, those haven't arrived from the New World yet, but parsnips. Turnips. Carrots so tough, they feel carved from tree bark. The cook, Brother Ludo, gives you a dull knife and a pile as high as your sins. He says nothing else, just nods at the bench. You peel, for hours. Silently. But even here, you feel it. A glance, a pause. You begin to wonder, what do they think you've done? Did someone see you in the library? Or did you simply look too thoughtful, too curious, too unguarded? That's all it takes here. After sext, you're permitted a short walk in the outer garden. Alone, technically, but there's always someone nearby. A shadow behind a pillar. A cough behind a wall. You no longer believe in true solitude. You sit on a bench, eyes on the hedges, hands still smelling of onion skin and vinegar. You think of the anonymous book again, the strange metaphors, the quiet freedom. You think of writing something of your own, not for the rule, not for God, just for you, but you don't, because you know. Now, you are always being watched. even when you're silent, even when you're obedient, even when you're dreaming. Historians still debate whether this culture of surveillance created better monks or simply quieter ones. Some argue it prevented spiritual decay. Others believe it eroded trust, creating lives of quiet paranoia cloaked in robes of piety. You can't decide. All you know is that tonight, during prayer, you notice something strange. The abbot doesn't chant, he just stares at you, and you realize you're no longer being observed casually. You're being studied. By now, your world has become a whisper. Every glance feels like a question. Every silence, an accusation. And worst of all, your own mind no longer feels like safe ground, because something has shifted inside you. Not a rebellion. Not a crisis. Something simpler. Stranger. Desire. Not for food, or warmth, or even escape. Desire for touch, for contact. For someone's shoulder brushing yours in the chapel without immediate withdrawal. For laughter without shame. For the weight of another human presence pressed close, not in sin, not in lust, but in the need to not vanish. And that, in a place built on celibacy, is terrifying. You are surrounded by men every day, every hour, every voice, every breath, every bowl passed across the refectory mail. It should become background noise by now, but it hasn't. Mainstream historical fact. Celibacy was a core expectation of most Western monastic orders by the High Middle Ages, seen as a form of complete spiritual focus. The monk was married to God. Fleshly desire of any kind was to be mortified, confessed, extinguished. But you are human, and your body remembers things your mind is told to forget. You start noticing how close Brother Senric stands when speaking, the warmth of Brother Alred's hand as he passes a lit candle, the softness in Brother Ludo's voice when he says, "Take care, the hearthstones are slick." It's not sin, but it's not sanctioned either. You catch yourself watching someone walk away, just watching, not imagining, not plotting, just noticing, and then hating yourself for it. Because the rule says even your thoughts must be pure. Because this place isn't just about actions, it's about intent. Fringe tidbit. Some monasteries practiced nightly inspections visitatio nocturna to ensure no two monks were in the same bed, or even the same cell. Beds were spaced precisely. Doors left ajar, and the worst crime wasn't falling asleep in the wrong place, it was being caught feeling comfortable there. You begin dreaming, not vividly, not romantically, just tactile dreams. A hand on your shoulder, a voice whispering your name, not Brother Dominic, but your real name, the one they burned at the gate. And when you wake, you feel worse than if you'd stolen bread. You want to confess, but how do you say, "I dreamed of kindness"? How do you explain that you didn't want the body, just the recognition that you have one? During chapter, another monk is reprimanded. Not named, of course. That would be cruel. But the offense is clear enough. Brotherhood requires distance, says the abbot. We are not the world. We do not embrace. We do not comfort with the hand. We do not look to each other for warmth. No one moves, but everyone knows, and every monk begins sitting an inch farther apart. That night, your candle burns lower than usual. You write nothing. You just stare at the wall, listening to the silence between stone blocks, wondering if anyone else feels like this. If anyone else is unraveling slowly, not from disobedience, but from loneliness. Historians still argue whether enforced celibacy strengthened or shattered the monastic soul. Some say it channeled energy into devotion, others say it twisted men into shadows, watching each other endlessly, denying even their need to be known. You don't know which side is right. You just know that tomorrow, you will rise again, kneel again, chant again, and carry that flicker of forbidden softness like a secret ember in a cold hearth, because even in silence, desire still breathes. And here, desire has no sanctuary. You're standing in the cloister courtyard, staring at the outer gate. It's not open exactly, just there. Solid wood, iron-bound, closed as always. But suddenly, you're aware of it in a way you weren't before. You can feel it. What's beyond it? The fields, the road, the towns, the world. You haven't left the monastery grounds in weeks, and now, you begin to wonder if you ever truly could. Because here's something they don't. Right in the rule, you can't just walk away. You ask the question once quietly, hypothetically, to Brother Senric as you haul firewood through the cloister. He doesn't look at you when he answers. No one leaves, not without permission. And permission means the abbot says your soul is ready. You think he's joking. Then you see the look in his eyes. He's not. Mainstream historical fact. By the High Middle Ages, most monastic orders had strict rules against unsanctioned departure. A monk who fled the monastery without release from his vows was labeled a fugitive. In some regions, local authorities were allowed to return him by force. In others, excommunication was automatic. Fringe tidbit. Some monasteries kept guest houses not just for visitors, but for monks who tried to leave, but later begged to return. They were held there under spiritual probation, watched, examined, tested, not prisoners, but not quite brethren, either. You ask nothing more, but that night, the thought lingers. You stare at the heavy bolt on your cell door, and wonder how thick the stone walls are, whether someone could climb them, whether anyone ever has. You try to picture yourself walking away, but here's the thing, you can't. Not just because you'd be stopped, but because something inside you resists it. Leaving would mean admitting failure, that you weren't strong enough, holy enough, that silence was too loud, and obedience too much to bear. And worse, you'd be leaving behind everyone who did stay. What would that make you? You rise the next morning and kneel at prime like always, but your thoughts are distant. You remember a tale one monk told during a mealtime reading. A brother who fled the monastery in the middle of the night, only to be found days later in a tavern, drunk and crying into his bread, begging to return. They let him, but not immediately. First came penance, reconfession, months of silent labor, and sleeping in the cold. You wonder if it was worth it. After terce, you're assigned to clean the guesthouse hallway. It's rarely used, dusty and quiet, filled with creaking boards and strange echoes. And at the end of it, you find a door that looks different, larger, heavier, locked from the outside. A single phrase is carved above it in Latin: quod initium habet, finem habet. That which has a beginning has an end. You ask no one about it. You sweep the floor. You close the shutters. You say your prayers, and you leave, but the image stays in your mind. Later, at dinner, the abbot stands. He speaks slowly, his voice heavy with ancient rhythm. Fleeing is not escape. It is a return to slavery. No one looks at you, but you feel seen. That night, you can't sleep. The straw itches worse than usual. Your mind races. You rise and walk the cloister, walk alone, bare feet on cold stone. The stars are out, pale and distant. You glance once toward the gate. It stands quiet, as it always has. You whisper to no one, I don't want to leave. And immediately think, why did I say that out loud? Because maybe part of you does. Historians still argue whether the prohibition on leaving was about spiritual protection or institutional control. Some claim it kept weak souls from wandering into sin. Others say it ensured unpaid labor stayed. You just know this. Leaving isn't about running. It's about admitting you were wrong to enter. And here, being wrong is worse than being lost. You return to your cell. You light your candle. You scratch a single word into the wax column, stay then. Blow out the light, and listen to the silence seal you in again. You wake up sweating. Not from heat, there's none of that here, but from something deeper. A dream you can't quite remember. Something about light and a voice and the sensation of being lifted, and then dropped. You sit up in the dark, your robe clinging to your skin. The candle beside your bed has long since burned out. The air in your cell feels too close. You press your hands to your face and whisper a prayer, not because you believe you're in danger, but because that's what you've been trained to do when something inside you shifts unexpectedly. Today, you're not scheduled for the scriptorium, or the garden, or even firewood duty. Today, you're summoned. A novice hands you a slip of parchment after bearing only 2 words. Speak truth. You know where you're going, the abbot's hole, and that only ever means one of two things: promotion or evaluation, and you are not being promoted. You walk the corridor slowly, sandals whispering over the stone. Your hands are folded so tightly they ache. When you reach the doorway, you pause, breathe, then knock. Inside, the abbot sits alone. No table, no books. Just a small stool beside a crucifix and a wooden chair for you. He gestures. You sit. The silence between you stretches like wire. You're not supposed to speak first, so you wait. Finally, the abbot says, "You have questions." It isn't an accusation, but it isn't kind either. You answer carefully. "I have thoughts. I'm trying to understand." Understanding, he says, is often confused with doubt. You nod, slowly. "Then I will be careful with both." He looks at you, deeply. And here's the part that shakes you. He doesn't look angry, or suspicious. He looks tired. Like someone who's seen hundreds of monks sit in this same chair and say these same things. Over and over, like a script written by the soul's unease. "Have you seen visions?" he asks next. You hesitate, not because the answer is complicated, but because the question is, what counts as a vision? That dream you barely remember. That pull you felt when you saw the chained books. The way silence sometimes fills your chest like cold water. You answer honestly. "No," he nods slowly. "And if you did, I would write it down," you say. "Then I would ask for guidance." He seems to accept this mainstream historical fact. Visions and mystical experiences were not unheard of in medieval monastic life. Some were accepted as divine revelations, others were treated as dangerous delusions. Acceptance often depended less on content and more on who was having them and how politically convenient the vision was. Fringe tidbit. Some monks who claimed divine visions were revered as saints in their lifetime. Others were locked in their cells and left to pray through their hallucinations. The difference could come down to whether the abbot believed them more feared them. The abbot asks, "What do you fear most?" You blink. "Here." He nods. You think for a long time. Then answer, "That I will forget what I was before and stop noticing." He studies you, not like a judge. Like a man trying to remember something long buried. You must not seek comfort in doubt, he says quietly, nor pride in suffering. Both are disguises. You nod again, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified that he sees straight through you. Then he says the sentence that stays with you long after you leave the room. Saints do not seek to be understood. You're dismissed. No penance. No punishment. No new assignment. Just the slow release of breath as you step back into the cloister. The air outside feels lighter. Or maybe it's just your head. You kneel by the fountain and let the cold splash of water remind you you're still here, still real, still you, whatever that means now. You catch Brother Alred watching from a distance. He raises an eyebrow. You give the smallest shrug. He nods. A gesture that somehow says, "They let you walk out." That's something. At Vespers, the chants feel richer somehow. Not because you believe every word, but because you now understand that everyone here is humming under the weight of something unsaid. The rule demands truth, but sometimes truth is a silence you survive. You return to your cell that night, sit on the edge of your straw mattress, and take out your wax tablet. "You're right," he asked. "What I fear. I think it's becoming good at this." Then you wipe it clean. Because even that is a vision you're not ready to admit. A caravan arrives at dawn. You hear it before you see it, the creak of wooden wheels, the bray of a stubborn mule, the low murmurs of voices speaking languages you can't place. You're sweeping the outer cloister walkway, trying to stay unnoticed, when the porter calls for assistance. Visitors, pilgrims, and with them, Risky join two other monks at the front gate. The caravan consists of maybe a dozen people, dusty, travel-worn, draped in cloaks that flap in the wind. Some carry bundles wrapped in waxed linen. Others lead animals too thin to bother kicking. But what captures your attention is the boy barely 10, limp in a cart lined with straw, pale, breathing shallow. His skin has the same grey hue as wax left too, close to a candle. The porter exchanges glances with the elder monk beside him. Then he nods. The gate opens. The pilgrims are permitted inside, not for shelter, not for rest, but because the monastery is obliged to offer aid to the sick. Mainstream historical fact: monasteries were some of the only places in medieval Europe that offered rudimentary care to travelers, especially those on pilgrimage. Monks housed the ill, fed the poor, and sometimes even operated crude hospices. It was holy duty and, more practically, reputation management. Fringe tidbit: the line between pilgrim and plague-bearer was razor thin. Some monasteries developed complex quarantine rituals. Incoming guests were housed separately, their belongings burned or aired out, and their symptoms quietly monitored from behind curtain walls. But even with all that, illness always got in. By midday, the boy is moved to the infirmary. You help change his linens. He doesn't wake. His breathing rattles like a loose tile in a windstorm. You're told not to touch his face. No one says the word plague, but you hear it anyway. In the way, the monks glance toward the apothecary and start burning rosemary near the doors. In the sudden, intense scrubbing of the cloister floors, in the quiet prayer added to Vespers, tonight an old chant you've never sung before, something about pestilence, and divine mercy. You try not to think of how many bowls you've shared, how many times you've filled the same basin with water, how many hands touch the same door latch. At dinner, conversation is still forbidden, but silence feels heavier. Even Brother Senric keeps his eyes on his bowl. You eat less, sleep less. And when the bell rings at matins, your first thought isn't of prayer, but of symptoms. Sore throat, no. Fatigue. Yes, but, always. You press your palm to your forehead. Cool, probably. You hear someone cough to cells down. The rule offers no special instruction for fear, only that you obey. The next day, you're told to assist in the guest house cleaning, the rooms after the pilgrims depart. You open the shutters. The boy is gone, not healed, not improved, just gone. The porter says he passed before Cumplin. His family carried him out by lantern light. No burial here, no rites. The monastery is clean. At least, for now, historians still debate how effectively monasteries managed disease. Some records suggest that their relative isolation helped prevent large outbreaks. Others detail whole communities wiped out in weeks. Sanitation was better than most towns, but that's a very low bar in the 14th century. You sweep the guesthouse floor slowly. Dust rises in swirls. A tiny tuft of fabric lies near the straw mattress, the corner of a child's blanket, embroidered with a single crude star. You pick it up, fold it, place it on the windowsill. No one will mention him again. That night, Brother Alred pulls you aside after his voice is low. I remember when sickness came before, he says. Years ago. They didn't tell us until half the brothers were coughing blood. You stare at him. Is it happening again? He shrugs. Probably not. Maybe. Then, after a pause, don't lick anything. You almost laugh. Almost instead, you return to your cell and light your candle. Your wax tablet waits, unmarked. You write, the boy had a star. Then scrape it away because remembering is dangerous here, and grief spreads faster than any disease. The rain begins at none. Not a gentle drizzle, but a curtain grey, unrelenting. As if the sky itself has grown tired of holding back. It slaps against the roof tiles like 1,000 wet palms. The stone cloister darkens with wet streaks, and the courtyards become shallow lakes, dotted with yellow leaves. You're mending sandals in the workshop when the storm hits. The sound on the roof is so loud, it drowns out the rasp of your awl. You pause, staring at the small, cracked leather sole in your hands, and for just a moment, you feel unreasonably sad. Alred passes by and mutters, God is washing something. You don't reply. You want to believe it's true, but today, your faith feels as soaked as the walkways. By Vespers, half the monastery is damp. Robes drip onto stone. Straw mats smell of mildew. Even the firewood seems to weep. The only warmth is the library, a rare refuge. You're sent there to assist Brother Joannes in cleaning up the leak near the northern wall. And that's when it happens. A book falls. Not just any book. A small, red-covered manuscript tumbles from the upper shelf, landing spine up in a puddle of rainwater. You rush to lift it, gently, but the damage is done. The ink bleeds at the edges. The cover warps. Brother Joannes gasps softly and hurries to you. He takes it from your hands and cradles it like a wounded animal. "This copy is irreplaceable," he whispers. He turns it open to the inside cover. Written there, in faded brown ink, transcribed by Brother Gervus, Feast of St. Thomas, 1289. The silence thickens. You both stare at the name. He sees it. You see it. Neither of you says anything, because he is not to be mentioned. Brother Joannes simply closes the book, wraps it in dry cloth, and places it aside on a lower shelf now. Less sacred. More forgotten. Mainstream historical fact. Monastic libraries were treasure troves of irreplaceable manuscripts. Many monks dedicated decades to copying a single gospel or theological text by hand. But if a monk fell out of favor, it was not unheard of for his name to be quietly erased, or the manuscript to be reattributed posthumously. Fringe tidbit. Some monks left small hidden signatures, tiny drawings, coded initials, even acrostics in the margins of pages, as a way of ensuring that, even if the church erased their names, something of them would remain. You glance at the book again. There, barely visible in the margin near the first psalm, is a faded drawing, a rabbit, mid-leap. It's almost joyful. Your heart tightens. You think, maybe Gervus wasn't just the steward. Maybe he copied the words. Maybe he loved them. Maybe that rabbit was a prayer no one else knew how to say. You return to your cell, with wet sleeves and a head full of ghosts. That night, during Copland, the storm still rages. The wind whistles through the cracks in the walls. Rain taps against the chapel's stained glass like impatient fingers. The chants echo strangely drowned, somehow, by the elements. And then the candle on the far left flickers out. No one moves, but in the silence, the abbot's voice rises over the storm. Even when the lamps go dark, the rule remains. You feel that deep in your ribs. Not as comfort. As command. You walk the cloister after prayers, just to feel the storm. You let the rain soak your hood, drip into your collar, run down your spine. You lift your face and whisper, "Was it worth it?" You don't expect an answer, but maybe the rabbit was one. Historians still argue whether monks found joy in their silence, or merely learned how to live beneath it. Some journals hint at inner peace, others lost fragments. Odd letters speak of yearning, rebellion, even laughter. You press your forehead to the cold stone wall. You say nothing, because here, even your questions must be weatherproof. The storm finally breaks, just before dawn. Not gently, like a curtain lifting, but in a single sudden stop, like a held breath, released all at once. You awaken to stillness so unnatural, it makes your ears ring. No rain, no wind, just the distant creak of dripping gutters and the soft plop of water from the eaves. You rise from your straw bed and step into the cloister walk. Everything is glistening. The stone underfoot shines like black glass. Puddles mirror the pale sky. The herb garden glows under a thin veil of mist. You pause to watch a bird's maw shivering shake itself free on the ledge. It feels like the world is breathing again. But in the scriptorium, something is wrong, brother. Arnulf is missing, not just absent missing. His robe is still on its hook, his tablet untouched. No one saw him at Lourdes. His candle was found still burning beside his bed. And that's the strange part, because no monk would ever leave a flame unattended. You're told to stay where you are, but whispers move faster than permission. Some say he ran, others suggest he was taken. Brother Senric says nothing, but stares at the empty seat with a clenched jaw. Only Alred speaks aloud. He left through the orchard gate. He says, "I saw him when pressed." He adds, "He wasn't carrying anything, just walking. No sandals, just the dark." The abbot calls a private meeting with the elder brothers. You are not invited. Mainstream historical fact, runaway monks were a real concern in medieval monastic life. Canon law required monasteries to attempt recoveries, sometimes even issuing formal excommunications if a monk refused to return. But enforcement was uneven, and many monks who fled simply vanished into lay society, assuming new lives under new names. Fringe tidbit. One 13th century Benedictine chronicle mentions a brother who left the monastery on foot and was spotted years later as a traveling bonesetter, preaching scripture on street corners and offering to mend both body and soul for a price. You think of Brother Arnulf's voice low, always cautious, prone to stammering when surprised. You remember how he once traced a vine into the margin of a text when no one was looking. You remember how his hands shook during prayers, especially during the line "Deliver us from temptation." You try to imagine him, now barefoot, robe flapping, slipping between wet orchard trees into the wide, unknown dark. You try to imagine what he was chasing, and what chased him. Later, Brother Joannes says softly, "He'll be caught," you ask. Do you want him to be Joannes? Doesn't answer. That night, the abbot speaks briefly before Compline. His voice is quiet, flat. "We pray for the soul of Brother Arnulf, who has strayed." Double quotes. No one corrects him. No one says, escaped. No one says freed, because those are not permitted categories, only strayed, like a sheep. But you're beginning to suspect that not everyone who leaves is lost. You walk the orchard path the next day, under a cold grey sky. The leaves are slick. The earth is soft from days of rain. You find no footprints, but near the back gate, partially hidden by brambles, you spot a small wooden cross, no taller than your hand, pressed into the mud. It's not there by accident. Someone placed it carefully. You kneel, touch it, then leave it undisturbed. Historians still argue whether such disappearances were rare acts of desperation or common breaks in obedience. Some suggest these monks were spiritually ill. Others believe they were simply human, pushed to choose freedom over ritual, uncertainty over silent decay. You return to your cell. You write nothing. Instead, you fold your wax tablet shut, and for the first time, you allow yourself to imagine it. You, walking barefoot past the orchard. You, following that same quiet path into the dark. Not because you hate this place, but because the thought of never leaving has begun to feel heavier than sign. You lie down, you close your eyes, and you whisper, not a prayer, but a hope. May he be warm. The monastery feels quieter after that. Not because anyone speaks less, how could they? But because something in the air has shifted. The silence now hums with questions. Everyone walks more carefully, reads more slowly, glances before they look. Brother Arnulf is never mentioned again. Not by name. His robe is burned, his tablets scraped clean. His name scratched from the duty slate with such force it leaves a gouge in the wood. The day after his disappearance, you're reassigned to candle-making. It's one of the monastery's lesser-loved tasks, hot, slow, and faintly dangerous. You melt tallow over low flames, strain it through old cloth, and pour it, layer by layer, around cotton wicks. It takes hours to build a single candle, but in that silence, just the soft hiss of fat, the occasional pop, you find a strange clarity. You begin to think, not just about the rule, or God, or who's missing, and who's watching. You think about yourself, who you were before this place, the name you barely speak, the last thing you touched before walking through the monastery gates. A coin, a letter, a hand, you can't remember. Mainstream historical fact. Monks were often required to abandon their previous identity upon taking vows, name, possessions, family ties. In some cases, even speech was curtailed to the point that they forgot the sound of their own voices. Fringe tidbit. Some novice monks in stricter orders were told to write down every memory they wished to forget, then watch as the parchment was burned. A symbolic death. Not always metaphorical. The wax thickens. You dip the wick again. It's meditative, in a way repetitive, warm. The smell is foul, but you stop noticing after a while. It seeps into your robe, your fingernails, your breath. Brother Senric works beside you. For hours, he says nothing. Then, suddenly, if you left, would you come? Back. You blink. He never asks questions. I don't know, you reply. Neither did he. You don't need to ask who later. In the refectory, a single candle flickers above the table. The light is soft, golden. Yours no one comments, but they all. Notice you feel it in the way Brother Joannes nods. In the way the abbot lets his eyes rest on you an extra second. You made that light and it is allowed to burn, that night. After Compline, you slip out into the cloister again. The stars are back fewer now, blurred behind lingering clouds but present. You walk without purpose. Just movement, just breath. The cold bites, but not cruelly. You pause by the fountain. Dip your fingers into the water, and watch the ripples. Dance under starlight. Alred joins you again. He doesn't speak, but after a while, he holds something out. A thin scrap of parchment. You take it. It reads, "Even light forgets its source." You stare at it. He shrugs, then walks away. Historians still argue whether monastic detachment was spiritual strength or emotional repression. Some see monks as beacons of devotion. Others see them as men slowly folding into silence, until nothing remains but ritual. You tuck the parchment into your robe, not out of fear, but because you want to remember back in your cell. You light one of your candles. You sit by its glow. And you do not pray. You do not write. You just sit in the presence of a quiet that belongs to you, not the rule. The flame dances, steady, warm. You breathe. And for the first time since you arrived, the silence does not feel like surrender. It feels like space. The bell tolls at midnight. Not for prayer, not for death, but because something rare is happening. A traveler has arrived alone under the cover of moonlight. Soaked from head to toe, he knocks once at the monastery gate, then collapses. The porter drags him inside, wraps him in a wool blanket, and calls for assistance. You're one of the brothers sent to help. He's young, not much older than you, filthy, wild-eyed. His clothes suggest he's been on the road for days. He mumbles incoherently as you carry him to the guest cell. His breath reeks of wet ash and sour wine. You lay him down on a cot. He grips your arm with surprising strength and whispers, "I ran," then falls unconscious. You sit beside him for a while. Long after you've been dismissed, you watch his chest rise and fall. You wonder where he came from, and what chased him. Mainstream historical fact: monasteries were one of the only places, in medieval Europe, where travelers could find safe shelter without paying coin. Even enemies of the church could sometimes beg refuge, at least until morning. Fringe tidbit: in one 14th century French abbey, a man claimed sanctuary from a vengeful lord after stealing a sheep. He was allowed to stay for 3 nights, during which time he recited psalms in Latin and ate only wild onions. On the 4th day, he behind a single boot nailed to the door. By morning, the traveler is gone. The guest cell is empty. The blanket folded. A single wet footprint remains by the threshold. Pointed outward, the porter claims he let himself out, but no one saw the gate open. The abbot says nothing during Lauds, just that silence is, at times, God's gentlest correction. You feel a strange ache in your chest, not for the traveler, but for what his running reminded you of later that day. You're assigned to dust the library shelves. It's a peaceful task. You find yourself lingering. You pause by the manuscript with the rabbit drawing, still there, still leaping, still quiet. You move to your own little shelf of tools: wax tablet, candle stub, the tiny parchment scrap Alred gave you, now slightly curled at the edges. You breathe deeply. You know now that you will stay. Not because you have to, but because this place, with all its silence and suspicion and storms, is yours, now too. Because in all its harshness, it has made space for something surprising. Not holiness, not certainty, but truth. The kind that flickers, and sometimes hides, and sometimes leaves, but always returns, like a candle flame you thought had died, but was only waiting for the wind to settle. Historians still debate whether monks truly achieved enlightenment or simply learned how to live inside the questions, whether their vows of poverty, silence, and obedience brought them closer to God. or simply further from themselves. You don't know the answer, but as you press your hand to the cold stone wall one last time tonight, you realize something else. You're still here, and that, somehow, is everything. Now the storm has passed, the candle's gone low. The footsteps in the cloister have faded into memory. You're back in your own bed, not the straw mat, not the stone selve, but the quiet comfort of the room you know best. Let it be still now. You've walked in borrowed sandals, traced fading ink, and carried a silence that hummed like a question. You've felt hunger that sharpened your thoughts, and sleep that carried secrets. You've listened for bells not to obey, but simply to mark time and remind you that even the longest night has its ending. You don't need to remember everything, just enough. Rabbit in a margin, a boy with a star, a brother who walked barefoot into the orchard and never came back. These aren't just stories, they're quiet echoes of what it means to try, to endure, to hope silently, stubbornly, when the rule says nothing about hope. Let your breath slow now. Let the last of the rain fall away. There's no more chanting to do, no more wax to pour, no more questions to hush. Just the soft hush of your own heartbeat, the memory of flickering light, and the silence that for once doesn't demand anything from you. Sleep well, monk. Tomorrow will wait.